Good morning, NAB. Well, what an exciting week we've got ahead of us with DigiWeek. We're going to hear from a variety of different people about a variety of different experiences, all interesting for entirely different reasons. This one in particular has really excited me though. As someone who's getting married in January next year, I've been using this website almost non-stop for the past 6 months, getting ideas and insights, and I'm super excited to hear about the story on how we transferred from a print to a digital environment. Today we're going to be hearing from Kirsten and Toby McKeldin as they talk to us about their business, RealWeddings. Toby's been recognised as a domain expert in business development training and coaching for professional services, IT and finance firms. Prior to launching RealWeddings, he enjoyed a successful international career with some of the world's leading advertising and technology companies. Toby's an established expert in sales and marketing field and has consulted to Bain & Co, Google, PwC, Deloitte, Oracle, EY and ANZ, amongst many others. Kirsten is the co-founder and director of Indigo Media Group. She was named Business Owner of the Year for Victoria at the Telstra Business Women's Awards and was an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. After studying publishing at New York University, together with her husband, they launched RealWeddings magazine, twice named Publishers Australia Magazine of the Year. Transitioning from print after 15 years, realweddings.com.au is now a leading digital platform delivering qualified leads to engagement, wedding and reception venues. Please welcome Kirsten and Toby.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody. Good morning. Welcome to this presentation on how we survived the digital transformation essentially from print to digital. Just making sure slides are working. Perhaps not. There we are. There we are. Good. So I use this word survived, but I think it's important to start by saying that we have never been more optimistic and excited about the future of the business than we are right now, thanks to digital. There's a lot of scary news, I think, in the media at the moment about the disruption to a lot of industries. In fact, I read an article quite recently from Deloitte saying that the next major industry to be digitally disrupted is the financial services industry. So I think there's a lot of challenge out there at the moment, but there's also an enormous amount of opportunity. And as, I guess, a couple that survived that transition period, given that print media was one of the first industries to be significantly disrupted, I'd like to try and suggest to you that there's a lot of hope and a lot of reason for optimism and excitement. So I'm conscious that a number of you will be sitting there thinking, yeah, but I'm in banking or I'm in another business, perhaps you're a client of NAB's, and what's weddings, what's magazines, what's print media got to do with me? My goal and our goal for this presentation this morning is to give you some very practical insights, suggestions and frameworks that you can use to help you navigate this landscape as we move towards an increasingly digital world. Because when we started this business 15 years ago, if you think about it, the buyer journey for a newly engaged bride, first thing every newly engaged woman would do is go down to the newsagent, buy every bridal magazine on the shelf, begin their research and plan their wedding. Today, nobody does that, unfortunately. The first thing everybody does is go to Pinterest, go to Facebook, go to Google, find their suppliers. So our underlying fundamental business model had to change, as I think so many business models are going to have to change. So that's the key message. Leave today, I hope, with hope and optimism and excitement about the future, because there is a way forward. So in terms of our agenda for this morning, we have really three subjects. We're going to talk about our adventure, sort of the growth of the business. Kirsten is going to take you through that. Then I'm going to come back, talk about how we adapted, and then the third part will all be about some specific advice and frameworks and tools that you can use. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Kirsten.
Thank you so much, Toby. I am really delighted to be here today because talking about the transition from print to digital is something that I haven't really had an opportunity to do in front of a group and to share that story. And for me, it's a very personal journey. We are right in the middle of an industrial revolution, a modern day industrial revolution. And Things are moving at an incredibly fast pace. It's exciting if you're on the right side of it. I mean, you think about how our lives have changed. Isn't it exciting that we can book our travel on Airbnb or jump into an Uber or, you know, watch our latest programs on Netflix? If you're on the right side of digital, it's a really exciting place to be. In fact, when we were in New York recently, the change for us was extraordinary, just in the simple way that we hailed a cab. Toby and I used to live in New York City, and I remember countless days of being on, say, Fifth Avenue or Broadway and trying desperately to hail a cab, hail a yellow taxi, to no avail, because as you're trying to hail a cab, there are 15 other people lined up along the street. We were there recently for a friend's wedding, and nothing could have been further from that experience. It was as simple as 30 seconds after ordering an Uber Black arrived with the tinted windows, and we felt like rock stars. It was such a change. But if you're not on the right side of this, if we think about those people that were disrupted in these industries, the people who used to print the CDs, the physical CDs, they're just gone. The local Blockbuster or video guy, gone. Amazon, bookshops, gone. And so if you're not on the right side of us, it can really be a place of anxiety and fear. And we know firsthand what it feels like to be in an industry that was totally digitally disrupted. Because publishing, you may remember, was one of the first industries to be disrupted. And in the space of just 8 years, some of the best and biggest brands have simply gone here in Australia and also across the world. Hundreds and hundreds of brands, some of them that were over 100 years old and woven into the very fabric of our society. I mean, Newsweek, for instance. And who remembers that feeling of going down and getting the latest BRW that had the rich list or the 40 under 40, or in our case, we were named one of BRW's fastest growing young companies. So those sort of experiences with magazines have simply gone. And it's really not surprising when you look at the statistics. Just recently, Fairfax Media lost 100 jobs. Actually, it was 125, correct me. News Corp lost 100, with another 300 slated to go, apparently. 60 jobs went at 7 West, and up until recently, as we know, the 10 network was in receivership. Who knows where that will go? There has been just a relentless fall in ad revenue. Since 2011, there have been 2,500 journalism jobs that have just gone. And when we think about those jobs, each of those jobs is not a number. As RJ said, they are people. They're people with commitments, with families, with jobs, mortgages and school fees. So each one of those represents something far greater to our community. Newspaper advertising alone has dropped 40% in the last 5 years, and that was on top of the 40% in the previous years. It is simply an unsustainable model now. And as Paul Barry said recently on Media Watch, for those that saw it, dollars from print advertising have turned into cents in the digital space. The reality is that people simply don't buy print, magazines, newspapers the way that they used to. And that audience has permanently migrated over to digital. Any debate that there may have been early on about whether this was a cyclical change or a structural change has well and truly been established. This is structural. The tide has gone out and it's simply not coming back. So, given all that, how did we as an independent niche publisher manage to not only survive but thrive in the transition from print to digital? And I'm going to start where the adventure began, because I want to put some context around just how great our business was and how badly we were disrupted, and how then Toby will explain how the growth happened. So our adventure begins in the summer of '99 in London. Toby had been living there 5 years. I arrived fresh off the boat. Both of us were from Melbourne. And within 11 weeks of meeting, Toby had flown me to Paris and popped the question. He was a rash man back then. And we began planning our wedding to hold it back in Melbourne at a later date. And in that time that we were planning our wedding, we got transferred to New York City. It was a very exciting time in our lives. And I remember planning the wedding, and my mum sent over a really big box of Australian magazines. And I remember sitting on the floor in our apartment and going through them, and they were just 300 pages of crap ads. And I said to Toby at the time, gee, like, where is the Vogue of the bridal industry in Australia? Where is the Martha Stewart of Australia? And of course, that was pre-jail Martha Stewart. And I could really see a gap in the market. So Toby and I got married back in Melbourne, and as you do, we honeymooned in Bora Bora because that was the logical place halfway between the States and Australia. And in the airport, I picked up Sir Richard Branson's autobiography called Losing My Virginity. And in it, he talked about being 16 years old and launching his own magazine called Student. And he tells the story about making advertiser phone calls from a phone box. Now, I can see there are some blank faces in the audience about what this is. This is a phone box. This is digital disruption at its heart. And there was one quote in the magazine, in the book, that particularly resonated with me. And I started to get so excited about it. And it said, if you publish a magazine, you're trying to create something that is original, that stands out from the crowd, that will last and hopefully serve some useful purpose. After all, you want to create something that you are proud of. And that for me resonated. Now, what's interesting about that quote and how it applies to you is you could take the words publish a magazine out of that, and you could put any business into that. And isn't that what we're all trying to achieve? Financial services, whether you're a florist or a gardener or whatever it is you do for a living, this is what we're all trying to achieve. So, Toby and I had the most extraordinary honeymoon. And on honeymoon, I was so inspired by this gap in the market that I could see to create the Vogue of the bridal industry that I wrote a 40-page business plan. Now, I'm fairly confident that when we went on our honeymoon, that was probably the very last thing Toby thought we might be doing on our honeymoon. Nonetheless, we went back to New York, and we had only lived one block from the World Trade Center. And we made these plans in earnest. I quit my job and I studied publishing at New York University. It was the most exciting time. And I was filled with these grand ideas about going back to Australia to launch the mag. And after I finished the study, I was consumed by fear and doubt and insecurity. And I was asking myself, Kirsten, who do you think you are to go back to Australia and just launch this magazine? You have no experience. You don't know what you're doing. And I was consumed with insecurity and doubt. But that'll change when Toby and I left on the 1st of September 2001. And 10 days later, like everybody else in the world, we watched in horror on the TV as the World Trade Centers came down. And it was particularly poignant for Toby and I because we were literally screaming and pointing at the TV and saying, you know, these people were running for their lives, being chased by that big cloud of debris. And we were saying, that's our building, that's our coffee shop, that's where I just bought my runners last week. It was inconceivable. And I remember having this incredibly strong feeling that life can be really unexpected. Things can change in a moment. And it was at that moment that Toby and I think, really made the decision that we wanted to live with purpose and passion. So we decided to do the magazine. And we worked hard. We put every bit of creativity, talent, energy, vision, everything went into that, and a lot of sacrifice as well, as any entrepreneur will tell you. And this entrepreneurial journey was from a bootstrapping startup to the very top of the $5 billion bridal industry here in Australia and the very top of the Australian publishing industry here in Australia. Things were good, people. We were riding high. It was an extraordinary time in our lives. We were lauded, applauded, and awarded. And I don't share this for any other reason than to share with you how great things were before they weren't. And the Telstra Business Women's Awards, Business Owner of the Year for Victoria. I was the first Australian to be invited to speak at New York University in the Publishing Institute. The BRW magazine named us one of the fastest growing young companies in Australia. We were a global finalist at the Webby Awards alongside GQ.com, MarthaStewart.com, Real Simple and The New Yorker. I was a finalist for the Entrepreneur of the Year Awards in Victoria, and I think most proudly, we rose to the top of our own industry, the publishing world, and we were not only named Consumer Magazine, but we were the first and only magazine that has ever won back-to-back Australian Magazine of the Year at the Publishers Australia Awards. And I share this with you because around the time that I was standing on stage accepting that award, and around the time that we were having a cup of tea with Dickie B, the first articles about the death of print started to arrive. And my anxiety and fear started. And there was a storm coming. The winds of change were coming, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. Takes me straight back. I really worried that what we'd created was simply a house of cards, and at some point this would all come tumbling down. Sorry. And imagine, if you will, that you are in the early 1900s and that it's the era of the horse and carriage, and you make the finest carriages in all the land. And people come from far and wide to buy your carriages because they are something extraordinary. And then all of a sudden, along comes a man called Henry Ford with his fandangled new contraption and invention called the automobile. It's a pretty scary place to be for us. And it felt like at one point we were just fighting against gravity. We used to be one of the only places that a bride could access high-end content, and we were really proud of that. The brides loved it, the advertisers loved it, the industry loved it, we loved it. But gradually, brides could find all that gorgeous content from across the world in blogs and Pinterest and eventually Instagram. Now, my anxiety at this point really was increasing. And I debated about whether to share this personal journey on stage with you today, but I want to convey that change can be a scary, unexpected, fearful place, but it can also bring growth and opportunity. But before I got to the growth and opportunity, it was fear and anxiety. Now I know that 1 in 5 people, both men and women, suffer from anxiety. So when I look into the audience, I know that there's a few who will resonate with the story I'm about to share. It started out as sort of these waves of nausea. Worry was the first thing I did when I woke up in the morning, and worry was the last thing I did at night. At 2 a.m. I had hours of sleeplessness, and I felt during the day this jittery sensation that I just couldn't shake. It was like I'd had 15 cups of coffee. You know that awful feeling you get? And these panic attacks that would sort of just come out of the blue. And I was a strong, capable woman, so this was quite a shock to me that I was feeling this way. And, like many people, I chose to handle it in the way I knew how, which was I drank too much. And I ate the wrong things. And I just stopped exercising. I essentially just went into my shell, which is kind of interesting for an extroverted person to be in their shell, but nonetheless, I managed it. I used to be what I call the Energizer Bunny. I had vision and drive and ambition, And then all of a sudden, it just felt like I'd run out of steam. Now, I know now that my adrenal glands were shot, just from stress. And I was literally running on empty. And two things happened, really, that brought everything to a head. The first happened was I started to have night terrors. Now, I'm not talking about the nightmare that we all occasionally get where you wake up with a pounding heart. I'm talking about for 6 months straight, every single night, I would wake up and feel like death was either in the hallway at the end of the bed or one particular night beside the bed. And on that night, I woke up in terror and threw myself backwards into Toby, which sort of puts a new perspective on the words jumping on your bones. I'm not sure he's ever really recovered, but it frightened the hell out of us. And the second thing that happened was that I was on my way to visit a very long-term client who'd been with us probably 12 years. And out of the blue on Beach Road, I had an anxiety attack, a panic attack that came out of the blue, and I literally nearly ran my car off the road. And I know I was this close to having a major accident and maybe doing some really serious damage. And again, bang, change happens in an instant. Toby and I knew that this couldn't go on. And so finally, I realised that I was overworked, overwhelmed, and so damn over it. You know, I was just pushing that big rock against gravity, and something had to break. And so finally I reached out to Toby and my family and to my doctor and to a psychologist. And really what I came to understand is that this was me desperately trying to hold on to something that was fundamentally broken beneath me. The industry, it didn't matter about our talent, our creativity, the amount of ambition we had. This was a broken model, the publishing industry, and I was just waiting to fall. Now, it turns out that I was grieving. I know this now through working with a professional. I was grieving for the loss of the success of what we had. And I was grieving for all of a sudden, this sense of financial instability that was brand new to us. And I was grieving, I think, also for the loss of my identity. You know, if I'm not the editor of an award-winning, lauded, applauded and awarded magazine, who am I? And it took me a while to realise that one powerful question could change it all. I think we're all guilty of sometimes saying to ourselves, what should I do? What should we do? In business, we do it all the time. What should we be doing? What are they doing over there? We should be doing that too. Let's do this. And sometimes the more powerful question is, what should we stop doing? In our case, what we needed to do was make that final call that we were getting out of the print publishing industry. Now, fortunately for us, 3 years before making this decision, we saw that coming because we had been to FIP in London, which is the largest global publishing conference in the world. And the reason we went there in 2009 was to ask and really see what the biggest players in this industry were doing. What answers did they have? What strategies were they implementing? What could we take away? And after 3 days in London at that conference, we got on that plane with this sickening and dawning realisation that nobody really knew how to stem the flow. It was broken, and so we made this decision to stop. And I would ask you, for those of you that own your own businesses, for those of you that work at NAB, what systems, what processes, what things are in play in your departments that actually aren't helping you where you need to go, but they're so ingrained into the habit of what we do that we just do them out of a sense of, well, we've always done it like that. And it goes back to innovation. Sometimes innovation starts with what you should stop. And here's what I know for sure, that success leaves footprints. So every bit of talent, strategy, creativity, ambition and drive, everything we've ever learned over this 15-year journey we can take those fundamental assets that are at the heart of our business and we transferred them. Ultimately, we had a breakthrough, but it took me, in the words of Jerry Maguire, breakdown, breakthrough. Well, took the breakdown in order to begin the start of the breakthrough. And I remember the day it happened. Toby was on the couch, on his laptop, looking at realestate.com.au. Now, in our house, Toby is very often on his laptop, looking at realestate.com.au. We're not in the market for another house, but he absolutely loves it. It's his thing. And in our house, we call it real estate porn, so that might put it in some perspective. And he turned to me and he said, you know when you search for a house and you can put in the suburb and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and so forth, why isn't somebody doing that in the wedding space just for wedding venues? And it was at that moment that everything changed for us. And I just want to leave you with a final thought, because Toby will be going in detail into how we did that. And it is that change is never easy, and particularly difficult when it's thrust upon you versus you choosing that change for yourself. And if you've ever lost a job, you'll know what that feels like. And for us, the way we adapt is critical. And digital offers such a place of growth and opportunity. And I think the one thing that hasn't changed in our transition from print to digital is Richard Branson's vision for business. We still want to create something of value. We want to create something that people will love, something that is useful, and something that ultimately we're very proud of. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. So, thanks, Kurt. This notion of adaptation then. So if you think back to the Darwin's quote, that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is the most adaptable to change. And I think that's incredibly relevant for the time we're living in. So when we began to think about how do we adapt our business to the new digital age, we first started to think about what business are we actually in? Are we in the print media business? Are we in the magazine business? Or are we in marketing, fundamentally? Because the nature of the wedding industry, Kerr mentioned it's about a $5 billion industry. Anyone reading The Age this morning would have seen that the Marriage Equality Act looks like it may come in even more quickly, so potentially by the end of this year. And some of the forecasts are that that will add another $2 billion to the wedding industry in Australia, so $7 billion a year in economic contribution. But the challenge with this industry is, if you think about it again of the life cycle and the journey of a couple who gets engaged, they enter the market, they do the research, not really knowing who the suppliers are, and then they exit. So for all the suppliers, all the small businesses who operate in this sector, there's very little enduring brand equity. It's very hard to build a brand when your core market is continually coming in, there for 12, 18 months and then leaving. So we thought, the fundamental need to continue marketing is always going to be there. In fact, it's probably even more than it ever was. So how do we then meet that need, but in this new digital age? Because, the speed of change, obviously, if anything, is only speeding up. And we had to be careful not to sink our investments into areas that weren't going to work. There has been such incredible flux in the last few years that there is a danger in investing all your capital into one particular spot, and then technology changes or buyer behaviour changes and you're gone. It's sunk cost, you're lost. So the first thing we want to do is look at what is working. And we were lucky enough to hear from car sales this morning, but we really took a step back and figured out who has got this figured out. And clearly these large vertical online marketplaces have captured hundreds of millions of dollars of profits from the traditional media players like Fairfax and others. So they've obviously figured something out. So we began to think, how can we be more like them? And we began to refine our ideas, and we created the new realweddings.com.au. We launched the first version of this a couple of years ago. We've tested and refined it, and we relaunched it recently. But the idea is a really simple one. We just want to connect newly engaged couples with their perfect engagement, wedding, and honeymoon venue and destination. And so just to give you a sense of how that looks and how it works, the idea is that the bride and groom would come in through the homepage. They would come to a landing page with some search criteria on it. They would enter their geographic search terms, much like realestate.com.au, the preferred style, their budget, whether the venue has ceremony capability, etc. A list would then narrow down. They would choose and click on one of the venues and be taken to a highly optimised landing page, essentially. And the goal of this landing page is both to promote the venue, but also to capture the lead information. So our whole value proposition is, how do we generate pre-qualified leads for our venues? And we're finding that it's working really well. It typically converts at least twice as well as the venue's website, and we're generating between a 5 to 10% positive return on investment for all of our venue clients. So, and that's led to at least a 90% retention rate. So it's an exciting time. The third part of it is the great thing that we've been able to bring our content back to life. So if you think about it from a print perspective, every time we started a new issue of the magazine, we would have to go and sell all the ads, find the editorial, produce it, print it. We used to print in Singapore, we'd ship it back, we'd then distribute it, it would go onto the newsstand, and it would be on the newsstand for a couple of months at best, and then it would be gone. And it was almost like it ceased to exist in that analogue age. Once it was off sale, it was finished. The amazing thing we've now been able to do is take that archive of evergreen content, bring it back online, optimise it all for SEO. We know now Google is all about content and search. So we're using all this asset that we had previously thought was perhaps going to be gone forever, and now it's helping us generate leads and inquiries for venues across the country. And we're adding to that all the time. So that's kind of the business model that we've moved to. I thought it would be worth, though, just touching on the operational side as well, because for us, this has been a huge thing, a huge advantage of digital, is that we've now moved all of our systems into the cloud. And as a small family-owned business, what that has allowed us to do is really start taking advantage of some of the incredible, powerful applications that previously only large corporates could really afford to have. So for example, the first major benefit is around cost reduction. So again, we started the business with our own capital. We've never had any outside financing. It's always grown through retained earnings. So any time that we could drive costs out of the business is awesome. And the SaaS applications we're using have helped us reduce costs significantly. But the other area is around sales, So traditionally we worked with approximately 100 core clients and advertisers that we would work in year out, and they were great. We loved having them as clients, but we were always slightly frustrated that we couldn't scale the business beyond that. The applications we're now using around marketing automation, sales, CRM, are really helping us to build our client base and our revenue far beyond what we were previously able to do, and there's really now no upside in what we can do. So shifting to digital has completely transformed our potential. The third area is around efficiency. So one of the things I've been working on the last couple of years is really developing standard operating procedures for every element of the business. So again, sales, marketing, production, and building them into our project management platform so that we can then plug talent from all over the world into our online systems in a very cost-effective way. And I know offshoring is a slightly contentious kind of subject, but the reality is for small business, it's meant that we're able to get really high-quality people at a much lower cost. So it's been a great advantage. So in terms of just bringing this through to some practical suggestions for you in your role, the third part of this presentation is just some advice. I'm just going to share a couple of models with you. I was reading just a couple of weeks ago an article in the Financial Review magazine, and they had an interview with their head of innovation for McKinsey, who I'm sure we're all familiar with, global management consulting company. McKinsey had identified that 65% of any organisation's growth comes from picking the right market to play in. So the other 35% comes down to better execution, more products, better distribution, etc. But 65% is going to come down to choosing the market to play in. And I thought that was a really profound thing, because so often we get caught up in how do we do business better. Sometimes it's just about, are we in the right business? So that leads me to the next slide, which is about when you're thinking about how to take advantage of digital, both for you or in your role with NAB, or if you're running your own business, the first thing I'd suggest is taking that helicopter view. So just like when we thought about what business are we actually in, you almost need to just take the big picture strategic view and think about what's happening in the marketplace. Because ideally, you'd like to pick a market where you're going to have the wind at your back. So there's a recent report by Deloitte talking about the growth industries in Australia. There's going to be about 25 real engines of growth in this country, Deloitte have identified. And the trick would be, how do you align yourself with those engines, either moving your business into that business or selling and servicing into one of those businesses? And that's things like agribusiness, ICT, wealth management, and a whole range of others. By the way, the point there too, Kerr mentioned that slide of the guy pushing that rock up a hill. That's how it felt for us for a long time. The ideal is you want to be moving to having the wind at your back. And then be prepared. So for me, this was all about educating myself around digital marketing. We've been print, it's a whole different universe. It's required a lot of education around blogs, conferences, seminars, doing courses, just getting myself in a position where, or we know what we're talking about in order to take advantage of digital. Because change is coming, we all know that. Again, Deloitte, I think, mentioned that financial services is the next big industry to be massively disrupted. All the new cryptographic currencies, Bitcoin, peer-to-peer lending, mobile banking, all the changes that are coming in are going to affect all of our jobs. And I think sometimes it can be hard to kind of believe that a little bit. Don't know if anyone saw, Al Gore was out here recently for a climate change conference, and he was interviewed on the ABC, and they were asking, are you discouraged at the speed of change in the way countries are not really adapting to climate change? And his view was no. He was actually reasonably optimistic and said that the thing about change is it happens much more slowly than you think it will, and then all of a sudden changes more quickly than you think it could. So I think that's the same too in large organisations. We see change coming in financial services, it's sneaking up, and the banks are all still booking multi-billion-dollar profits. It's kind of hard to believe that it's going to be coming, but it is coming. So, quick summary, grab the helicopter view, find an industry with the wind at your back, figure out what you need to stop doing to make time to get prepared. And on a personal level, this is just a little formula we've used on and off over the years. I read a book about 25 years ago called Awaken the Giant Within, written by a guy called Tony Robbins. One of the things in that book was his ultimate success formula. It's a simple little formula, but we've used it a lot when we're faced with challenges. The first one is to figure out what do we want, to get very detailed about that. For us, it was what business do we want to be in, what clients do we want to have, what's our revenue, our staffing, what do we want the website to look like. Then it's about taking massive action. Nothing is going to happen without taking a lot of action. Then thirdly, figure out what's working and what isn't, and then take that adaptive approach. Be prepared to change. I was recently listening to a podcast with interview with Peter Thiel, who is one of the co-founders of PayPal. He's a billionaire investor in Silicon Valley. And they were talking about the proclivity of Silicon Valley startup companies to pivot too quickly. They change their business model too quickly when it's not working. Peter's view was you've got to stick to it. It was the old view of persistence. I think we're in a market where you do need to pivot pretty quickly because things are changing so quickly. So, to summarise, we're living through a modern industrial revolution. I think I've heard it called the fourth industrial revolution. We need to take an adaptive approach, and I think a good place to start is by asking yourself, what should you stop doing in order to get prepared and prepare yourself for the incredible opportunities ahead. So thank you. We've enjoyed the opportunity of speaking with you. Appreciate it very much, and hopefully you'll take something helpful away from that.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Well, thank you very much. Now, do we have some time for a couple of questions? So we've got some roving microphones in the audience and we are live streaming this. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Down in the front here.
I'll come around this side.
Sorry.
Kirsten and Toby, that was amazing, and thank you for sharing your story. It looks like you bounced back, and I know obviously there was some really challenging times, and you had to kind of fundamentally rethink what you were doing. Can you elaborate a little bit around how long? So how much time from when you closed down the magazine to when you kind of launched the site, and what were there some key people that you brought around you? I know you did some study and things. How did you actually reinvent yourselves so well?
Do you answer that?
I'll start.
Yeah, go for it.
So Toby and I could see that it was coming. I mentioned that we'd been to London to the FIP conference. The articles about the death of media were regular. That, we knew it was coming, and so we were looking for a long time at what the next generation of our business might be, and we tried different things, didn't we? We tried maybe we go into a gift registry, maybe we do a freemium model and try and get $100 from every one of the 120,000 brides in Australia. So we tried different models. Ultimately, as Toby said, it was about what we could see, where the rivers of gold had gone to, that directory sort of model in the vertical markets. And about 3 years before we made the decision to close the magazine, we started with this model of the filtering and what have you. But we did it in 3 stages. So we had the magazine still going. We had an existing website that had been done in 2010. And rather than putting all our eggs in one basket in terms of, financially, we kept the existing website, and behind that, we developed this program that was accessible, and we started to test and refine on what's working. And it was only then when we could see the success, and we made errors and we adapted and pivoted, it was only then that we decided, okay, this is working. Now we feel ready to close the magazine and really put a new interface into that business that we've now created. So it wasn't a case of close the magazine and just hope this sticks. It was a case of testing different things until we knew we had it. When we knew we had it, that was when we made that final call, because we had something to go to, essentially. Did you?
No, it's perfect, yeah. Thank you.
I might have a question, which is, you kicked off the journey with Richard Branson's autobiography.
Yes.
Clearly an inspirational person.
Clearly.
Who are your inspirations today within the digital space?
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, I think Elon Musk is doing just extraordinary things in energy and with Tesla. I don't know whether that's exactly digital, but that's pretty exciting, where he's bringing accessibility to the world in terms of energy and panels on roofs and all this sort of stuff. So that's sort of my inspiration.
Yeah. The other one for me, actually, the guy I'm listening to a lot at the moment, I'm sure many of you heard him, Tim Ferriss, who's an author and he's written a number of books, but does some great podcasts with thought leaders in this space. Let's get a lot out of it, a lot of inspiration from him.
A question at the back.
Kirsten, prior to the change, you spoke about a strong part of your self-identity being identity as editor and premium editor. How do you see your self-identity now? What do you label yourself?
First and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur, and I worried that the person I was, who I am fundamentally, the person you see here today, filled with enthusiasm and drive and ambition and just excitement about being and sharing my story, I worried that person had gone. I felt broken. In terms of my identity, I'm an entrepreneur first and foremost, and I can't switch that part of my brain off. But I have a lot of hats I wear. I'm a great mum, to our 2 daughters, and an entrepreneur. And I said earlier when we first arrived that Toby and I, 20 years ago when we met in London, the very first night we met, we talked about the fact that Toby wanted to speak professionally and I wanted to speak professionally. I was like, no way, that's amazing. And we have, Toby was just in Sao Paulo training Google. I've done some speaking along the way, NYU, we've never had the opportunity to speak together. So 20 years later, to be on the stage together that's a dream come true. So thank you for the opportunity, to allow us to be on the stage together. It's really important. We want to do more of it.
Thank you. More questions? Okay, let's wrap it up then, and let's take a moment and thank our two presenters.
One last question.
Sorry.
I've been overruled. That's fine. That's for the audience.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was awesome to hear. Knowing change is coming and being able to do something about it and figuring out what that thing is really hard for anybody. My question is more around whilst things were awesome, and then they weren't. I think was your quote. Would you have done anything differently?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, absolutely. I would have reached out for help way earlier, personally. We were surrounding ourselves with professionals, who were trying to help us on the business, but I waited too long to reach out for help, and I think there was a lot of pride involved in that, that knowing I wasn't coping, somewhere deep down inside I knew I wasn't coping, and I would have done that because I put Toby and our daughters and myself through hell because I was too proud to reach out and say that I was struggling. So that's what I would have done differently.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, as I mentioned, there's a variety of different people who are going to be presenting at DigiWeek, and I want you all, as you walk out, to take a moment and just reflect on the digital artwork that we've got displayed at the back of the room. That's been presented this week by Amanda Morgan. Now, Amanda Morgan is a digital artist whose work has been showcased in places like Vivid in Sydney and White Night down here in Melbourne. She'll be speaking tomorrow at 2 p.m. in this room, and it'll be an interesting speech around everything we're doing at the moment in digital is about products and services, but what about the implication for the artistic field? So I look forward to seeing you all at further speeches this week. Thank you.